Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Our research-backed videos are engaging, easy to follow, and they help ease the daily challenges like agitation and anxiety so that you can focus on connection and joy. Available by subscription on mobile and TV apps, Zinnia makes every day a little bit easier. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation, as usual, as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Alzheimer Speaks. I'm thrilled you're able to join us today. We are going to be talking with a spouse who cared for her husband, and she's going to talk about her journey and her new book out, which is called You Make a Big Good, A Journey with Alzheimer's. And before I introduce you to Mary, I also want to invite those of you who are looking for a memory cafe. I do one online the second and fourth Wednesday of each month from about 1 to 3 o'clock, depending on how many people are there. And that is Central Time. So if it's Eastern, it'd be, 2 to 4 o'clock. So just reach out to me at Lori, Lori, at alzheimerspeaks.com, or you can go to alzheimerspeaks.com and just click on the contact button and give me a shout, and I'll send you information with the link to the Zoom meeting. And then if you're in Minnesota, in the Shoreview area, the last Wednesday of the month, we have an in-person support group that offers respite. It's called Caregiver Connect. It meets from 10 to 11:30 the last Wednesday of the month. If you'd like information on that, again, just give me a little ring-a-ding-ding, and we will go ahead and connect with you and give you more information on that. And last, I just invite you to check out our sister company, Dementia Map. It's a global resource directory, lots of free educational information there. And also, maybe you're a provider of information. Please don't be shy about listing your service, product, or tool on there. You can be a company, a for-profit, a nonprofit, a government agency. You can be living with dementia, or a family member or friend that has written a book, has a YouTube channel, a podcast, a Facebook page, whatever it might be. All of us together make a difference, and we invite you to join. And then on alzheimerspeaks.com, we have, of course, our free educational resources. You can check out a variety of things there as well. I appreciate you all being here, so please feel free to like, click, and share. And let's go ahead and introduce you to our guest. Well, Mary, I just feel so blessed to have you back with us. I just enjoy your company and your soul and your presence. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate your having me on to talk about my book.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm going to have you kind of introduce yourself to our audience, give them a little taste of, who's Mary?
All right. Well, my name is May Todd. I live in Massachusetts, and I am living in a senior residence. I moved from independent to assisted living about 6 months ago. But Jim and I were here. Well, let's see, maybe I should back up before that. I was born in Kentucky, and I went to a small liberal arts school there. And Jim grew up in New Hampshire, but he had a friend who recommended this Methodist school in Kentucky. So we that's where we met, and we were there for the 4 years. And before we graduated, we got married, and then he decided he wanted to be a minister, and he moved from Kentucky back up to Boston, and he wanted to go to Boston University School of Theology. So that was where we were. Jim was pastor of, once he graduated from BU, he was pastor of 6 or 7 churches, and he was the manager of the local conference center related to the church. And then the last 6 years before his retirement, he worked for the bishop's office. So then in our retirement, we traveled around the country in our Winnebago. And Jim was not much of a traveler, but I was. And he went to be along with me. So we did have, once we got on the road and got started, we really had a good time. And then our personal care, not personal care, PCP,
Mm-hmm.
a doctor, noticed that Jim was needing to order medicines before he should have run out of them. And Jim's process when he got medicines, he'd open them and he dumped all the medicines in a plastic bin, kind of like. And I didn't think much of it, but I thought, what? That's so stupid. Why is he doing that? And come to find out that he would dump them in this bin, and then when it was time to do his weekly meds, he'd pick out what he needed and put it in, and that was that. So the doctor decided that he probably needed to go for some cognitive training or evaluation, and found out that he had MCI, mild cognitive impairment. So that was kind of like the beginning. I didn't know what that was. I don't really know. I assumed that probably I knew Alzheimer's was there, but I was so naive, Lori. I just didn't know what I didn't know. So anyway, I'm online and I'm looking for support groups, looking for any information that I could find. And I found online a dementia-friendly cruise. And it was like, that doesn't even make sense. What is that? So I read about it, and before I knew it, we were on it. We went out of Florida and cruised in the Bahamas. And the small group of people that had dementia and their care partners or whoever came with them was a small part of this bigger cruise. But it was wonderful. It just, it was the first time that I had met people who had dementia. And so it was a revelation. And then later on, I learned about Alzheimer's Speak because you were there. And I started listening. And the corporate director of memory care for Brightview, which is a senior living facility, was on your program. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. And he was it was like a whole new field for me. And it was like, if even half of what he says is true, I at least need to look up what that is. So in the meantime, Jim and I had long-term care plans, and I didn't know how to use them. And so I decided, well, I ought to probably go talk to our financial person and say, we've got this and we're paying big bucks. Maybe we should just drop the premiums. And it was like, no, don't drop the premiums. You keep them. And his parents had just recently gone into assisted living. And he said, the transition for them was so hard. I would recommend that before you need it, you ought to start looking for a place to live. Well, that was a surprise as well. But when he said who he was and where he was from, it was like, well, I need to look that up. And would you believe it was 4 or 5 miles from home that there was one of these places? And the interesting thing is that I passed this place every time we went to the doctor's office. But I was so, I don't know, overwhelmed. I didn't look left or right. I just needed to get where I was going. So anyway, it was one of the places that we looked at. And after we met with the financial advisor, I think we were here in 3 or 4 months. We were living here. So
Wow.
the move was easy for me because we had moved so many different churches and stuff. But the move was not easy for Jim. It was really hard. So that was a little bit about our background and our history. For the book, I took notes every day when I went to visit Jim. It's one of the things that if I write it down, I'm more likely to be able to remember it or make sense of it. So everywhere I went, I always took a notebook. And when I visited Jim, I took this notebook with my pen, and he was so confusing, and I was so confused. So it was really a way for me to try to understand what was happening to him and what was happening to me. And in the meantime, I had not been on Facebook very much, but I started posting on Facebook. And I didn't post every day, but I posted a lot. And it was kind of like, well, this is the good and the bad and the not so good part of dementia world today. And then after I had posted all those things, I had gone back he was in memory care for 2.5 years. So I occasionally went back and I thought, well, probably I ought to do something with those posts. So I copy them out of Facebook and paste them into a Word document. And Lori, I did that. I would say maybe 4, maybe 5 times, but I didn't know what I called them. I didn't know where I put them on the computer. And so I just decided maybe I just ought to start at the beginning and start all over. So I did. And when I finished, I had 89 pages of Microsoft Word document. It was pretty amazing that I had all that. But then I didn't know what to do with it. So I read it over and it was like, I don't know, this is not it. I don't know what it is, but this is not it. And then I thought, well, I probably ought to put this in a book. So I started thinking about it and was like, I don't know what to do. I wrote an introduction, and that was about as far as I got. And then I was on a webinar for people that are end-of-life doulas. So I had gotten the training, but had not actually worked with it yet. But at the end of this particular webinar, I said, and this is another one of those serendipity things, I asked, does anybody know anything about self-publishing? And Laurie, I didn't even know what self-publishing was. I had heard the words, but I didn't know what it was. But anyway, this woman came on and said, I know a lot about self-publishing, and I'd be glad to talk with you. So she gave me her number, and I called her the next day, and we talked, and it was lovely, and she had some suggestions, and it was all very nice. And then about 2 weeks later, she called back and said, Mary, I have something that I think you might be interested in, but let me just run it by you, and you can tell me. So she said, I really like what you're thinking about doing, and I'd like to help you out. She said, I have a woman that I work with. So this first woman was in Chicago, the one that I found on the webinar, and her friend was in Ohio. And she said, I want to know if it's okay with you if I give your name to her and see if that's something that you want to do. So it was like, geez, that's what? I couldn't wrap my head around it. So anyway, I was talking with the second person and she said, have you started writing at all? And I said, well, yes and no. I have 89 pages of notes. I could send those to you. Do you want those? And she said, absolutely. So she read over the notes and it was like, I tried organizing it and I didn't know what to do. And we talked about it and we decided that maybe chapters was the way to go. So I ended up with 10 chapters. The introduction that I had worked on, and then kind of went from there. And there were things that I hadn't included, like I didn't have a section on COVID because I thought, oh, nobody else is going to be going through COVID, but she thought it was interesting enough. And so she said, let me go through and I'll copy and paste and send to you all of the COVID references. She was just awesome. She just was so helpful and so unassuming. So that's kind of what she did. And then little by little, it started taking shape.
Wow. It is funny how you just kind of meet people, God just drops them in your life for, whatever reason and stuff. Now, the name of the book is You Make a Big Good, a journey, with Alzheimer's. How did you come up with that title, Mary?
Well, this was it was probably just maybe 3 or 4 weeks before Jim died. He didn't know who I was. So every time I went, I would have to say, hi, Jim, I'm Mary. So this time I wrote, he was sitting on a bench outside his room and all hunched over and wearing his favorite blue sweater. And so I go up to him and say, hi, Jim, it's Mary. Can I sit with you for a while? He didn't respond. His eyes were closed. And so I sat beside him and I put my hand on his knee and we sat there for a little while. And then he said, you make a big good. And it just kind of, it just kind of warmed my heart. And so I thought, okay, that'll be it. And I took a picture of him before I sat down, and I thought, well, that's it. I'll use that picture, and I'll use You Make a Big Good, and that'll be the cover. And then I sent my book out to some friends to read it for me, and one of the readers said, I know Jim, and that picture that you've got, I know it's important to you, but it's not the Jim I know. I would put something a little bit more upbeat on the cover.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
And, no pressure, just, and I thought, well, I had actually told the readers, I don't know that I can use this picture or not. So give me your feedback about what you think. So that was her feedback, and it was really, really helpful.
Yeah, the picture you have on the book is so nice. I mean, you two both look so happy. It's just wonderful. And that's how I remember you guys on the cruise too. Just these smiling faces and just always together and just, joyful and gracious and things. So I'm glad you picked that picture. Were there other titles that were kind of rumbling around in your head?
I did. There was one, and I don't remember what happened before this, but Jim said, "Today really joyed me." And
Oh,
I
I
said,
like that
"Oh,
one too.
Jim, I'm so glad that you're joyed. You joyed me today too, Jim." And so that was the other alternate title, which I think it didn't have the emotional content that You Make a Big Good had.
Mhm.
So I didn't seriously consider it because this one was just tugging at my heart saying, use this, use this. And
Mhm.
then changing the picture made a big difference as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I do like that. You really joyed me because I think so often people don't think about how we're making the other person feel.
Right.
And it really gets into that multi-sensory, slow down and what kind of impact are you having on somebody,
Yeah.
which is really, really cool. What's the most important message that you wanted to convey in your book?
Well, I wrote it as a care partner. And so it is for care partners. And I kind of want them to know that they're not alone, and also the importance of taking care of themselves. Um, because that's not something that I did easily, but I was so hungry for it. I I didn't know what to do with myself. My kids were wonderful. They were very supportive. But for me personally, just day by day, the grind was devastating at times. And so I would Google, support groups and support groups Massachusetts, support groups husband, and I found, I would say I must have joined maybe 6 or 7 different support groups.
Mhm.
Some of them in Massachusetts, some I think I had one that was in Virginia, Louisiana, uh, Colorado. And some would go for a short period of time, and others would take a break and then they'd come back. So I was in support groups a lot. And they were so helpful. And I'm still in touch with some of those people that were in those support groups. It was a lifesaver. And I'm so glad that not only that I made it a priority, but that it was so easy to do. Of course, everything was virtual. By that time, I wasn't driving. And so I didn't think the virtual groups would work, but they did. They were great. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it takes that loneliness away and you know you're understood and you're accepted and people
exactly.
validate all the roller coaster of emotions that you feel. Where sometimes you explain to family and friends and they try to be kind and understand, but they don't really get it.
Mhm.
And so sometimes stuff comes out sideways or you just feel like, oh, I'm not going to talk about it with them because they don't get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a interesting journey. Now, how did you structure the book and why did you structure it the way you did?
Well, once I decided that the 89 pages wasn't all that interesting,
Hmm.
maybe or useful, um, as I started writing a little bit, I did a chapter on caring for myself. Um, they kind of evolved over time. It wasn't something that I actually uh, planned it out. It was as I went along. Oh, that might work, and uh, then I would find the supporting stuff that I had talked with Jim about, and sometimes sometimes he didn't talk hardly at all. Other times, Lori, I couldn't keep up with him. And I would put do the recording on my iPhone and just let him talk, and then try to go back and what was it that he said? So yeah, it was a jumble for a very long time. And yeah, there were some chapters that were easier than others. The chapter on caring for myself was kind of easy because I had all these resources that I had used and suggestions that they had made. I called the Alzheimer's Association. I called the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, just anywhere that I could think of. And books. I read a lot of books written by professionals and also by people who had Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia. So I was like a sieve. It was just like I was sucking up. I couldn't get enough help, and I was needy. So yeah.
So you said, writing about self-help was pretty easy because you had tapped into so many resources to be able to share. What was it like a hard chapter to write for you?
Oh, I had a couple of that were just awful. The chapter called Memory Care Begins. It was horrible. So Jim, I think these are really connected, but I didn't get the connection actually till I started writing. But when Jim was 8, his father, who was an alcoholic, ripped up the family vegetable garden, and then he left town. And I think Jim felt angry about it and abandoned. And he was not allowed to mention his father's name. And that was especially true when his mother remarried several years later. But I think that sense of abandonment was, yeah, he said, it doesn't have anything to do with you, except you're the person that put me here. And it wasn't like, I've got to get out of here, but it was. I've got to find a way. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to get out of here. And if you won't help me get out, I don't know how I'll get out. So it went on and on and on. So that was The Memory Care Begins was a really hard chapter. The staff and the memory care were wonderful, but the move there was just awful. Like the horrible can't get worse kind of awful. He was so unhappy. And I felt guilty.
Oh yeah, because we all say we're not going to do that,
Yeah,
and
but
then things change.
it was there in spades. But I had another serendipitous thing that happened. I have a friend who is a hospice chaplain, and she lives on the West Coast. And she had put on Facebook, and I think this was maybe just after Jim had gone into memory care, but she was saying how writing can be really helpful. And that if anybody was interested, she'd send them a journal. And I thought to myself, well, that's probably a good idea. But I had started so many journals and I never kept up with it. When the journal arrived, she had a haiku blessing on it. And the haiku blessing was, may this be holy. May these writings be sacred. May you find healing. And that last line, I cried and cried and cried. And then I had to look up haiku. What is haiku? I know. So I had to go. I was probably in high school, but it was like 17 syllables in 3 lines, 5 syllables on the first line, 7 on the second line, and 5 on the third line. And I started having haiku come to me in my sleep. So I'd wake up counting syllables. It was like the weirdest thing. And then shortly after that, a friend gave me Reiki, which is Japanese kind of healing, relaxing. And after that, the haiku started pouring out of me. It was absolutely amazing. So I have a lot of haiku that is sprinkled throughout the book as well. So it was a very healing activity, and in such unexpected ways. Yeah, it was, and it got to be kind of fun. And then I'd get stuck. I couldn't get them all in this 17 syllables. And so
I remember having you on the show when you wrote your haikus, and oh my gosh, Mary, they're just so beautiful. So I'm so glad that you kind of dribbled them in and mixed it in with the
they
book.
did. Yeah. So it was one of those serendipitous things that she sent me a journal that made me cry and that started me on the journey of writing haiku. So, yeah.
Wow. A lot of people don't understand the power of writing in the healing process that it can be if you share it with anyone or not.
Yeah.
But just to get kind of unload it and get it out of your body and kind of give it a name and acknowledge what you've been through. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
That really is true. Yeah. So I didn't expect that when I wrote the haiku that I'd ever do anything with it. It wasn't a thought in my mind. Mm-hmm. We had written, I had a group of 4 women in our residence that I pulled together, and we were all supporting our spouses in one way or another. Mm-hmm. And we met weekly, and we'd come up with a prompt and we'd write, and then we'd read to each other. And that ended up being really important. In fact, I've got it at the beginning of the book, I put in one of the writings that I did. I don't know if I can find it right off the bat, but what I did was use the word Alzheimer's, and I wrote the letters down the side of the page, like ALZH. Mm-hmm. So this was this writing for this group of women in our residence. Alzheimer's, you suck. L. Let me tell you that you've ruined and interrupted so many people's lives, including mine. Z. Sometimes all I want to do is sleep. H. Hoping to wake up to a new reality without you, Alzheimer's. E. Everything and every day is colored by your presence, and it's not in good or beautiful ways. I do have some choices about my response to you, though. My voice doesn't need to be silenced. I can educate and be an advocate for care partners and for people who have Alzheimer's. R. Rest. Renew. Taking care of myself is a priority. If I don't do that, I will deplete myself and be no good to you or to Jim or to myself, meaning me. So, how will I continue to use my voice? How will I continue to support Jim through his confusion and his continuing struggle with Alzheimer's? How will I continue to educate myself and share what I learn? I haven't made peace with you yet, Alzheimer's, but I commit myself to continuing to work on it.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier. And my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
That's beautiful, Mary. Your words are just they just kind of flow off the page, and they're heartfelt. I mean, it's just, and you can feel the emotion, and just as a reader, it just justifies what someone else is going through, and it really kind of reaches across the page and goes, "You're not alone."
Oh, thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there must have been some challenges that you felt in terms of writing. Did you ever get that writer's block everyone talks about? Or
Well, the writer's block did not come right away. I think the biggest challenge for me was I didn't want to make Jim look bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled with that for months and months. And the two women who were kind of like my editor staff, just said, it's real. You want to write what's real. But it was really, really hard. And I had to kind of get over myself, I think. And I wanted it to be honest. But then when I was honest about it, some of it was really, really hard. So it was like, how honest can I be? And then if I'm going to be that honest about what Jim is going through, what about me? I ought to be honest about myself as well. So I kind of thought, well, I can write it. And if I don't like it, I can always take it out. So
Yep.
That was probably my biggest challenge, was not wanting to make Jim look bad.
Yeah. Well, and it's sad because the whole not making somebody look bad is all tied into the stigma of what people are going to think. And yet we can't change that perception if we don't tell them what it's really like, because we'll never get the services that we need and the understanding. And so it's such a double-edged sword. It's like so many families don't tell friends, that someone's got a diagnosis. And then we get upset when the friends suggest this or that, and they're like, what are you thinking? They can't do that. Now you've complicated my life even more, because now I got to undo what you just did. And I remember going through that with my mom and my dad. My mom had, dementia for 30 years. My dad had a brain tumor, and I got really mad at their friends, and I didn't, speak to them nasty, but inside I was just thinking, what the heck? Yeah.
Exactly.
And then I had to reflect, and it's like, well, they had not a clue. You were hiding it so well, you goofball. Mm-hmm. They didn't know. And so then it's like, okay, I got to change this approach, because this isn't fair to my folks, and it's not fair to them.
Yeah.
And I really realized how much people want to help. And I was kind of blocking that and taking that away, and yet on the inside probably complaining, like, where is everybody? Why aren't they helping, from my brothers to other people? And it's like, well, you're making it look like it's not an issue, Lori.
Yeah, it's like you suck it up and put on as good a face as you can, and
move on. Yeah, you become a Stepford wife, and that doesn't do anybody any good at all with that. Are you working on any other projects at all, or?
Well, not really. I've a lot of people have asked me, why don't you publish your haiku? Mm-hmm. So if I end up doing something, it might be something like that. So I have I started out with Alzheimer's love haiku
Mm-hmm.
and Alzheimer's grief haiku, COVID-19 haiku, end of life haiku. And that was a really healing part for me. So I thought I was done, but I also had end of life haiku part 2 because I wasn't done after 5 or 6 months after Jim died. So
Yeah, well, some of it's the restart of you.
Mhm.
I mean, it's about Jim, but it's really about getting your bearings and figuring out who are you after somebody passes. And boy, that's a tough place. I know when my dad died, I was lost. I had no idea who I was. I mean, I didn't know what I liked to do. I didn't know anything because I was so immersed in caring for both my parents,
Was that at the same time?
my mom lived with dementia for 30 years. My dad died in 2001. My mom didn't die until 2014. But I was dealing with both of them. Dad had brain cancer. They gave him a year and a half
Oh,
to live,
goodness.
and he lived 4.5 years. So we were really blessed to
Yeah.
have that extra time. But when you just get so anyways, I did immersed in all of that, and I was working full time. I was that sandwich generation, mom.
Yep.
I was married. I had other people living in my house. I didn't give up a dang thing. I just kept adding to.
Yep.
And then it was like, gosh, what am I doing? And I remember people going, well, what do you like to do? And I just like was a deer in headlights, like, I don't know. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? And I'm like, I really don't know. I haven't asked that question to myself for years and years,
I
and so
understand.
that
Yeah.
was kind of a shock to my system. It's like, and then I'm asking myself, well, how the heck can you not know what you like to do? And
Exactly.
and then you have to kind of admit, oh, guess I wasn't taking care of myself too good. I have no balance on my side at all.
Yeah. 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 Well, you'd ask about the easy and hard chapters to write. There's a chapter called Sundays and Other Special Days. So being a minister, Jim was all about Sundays. They had a service in memory care. And part of this, it was kind of based on a Catholic model, but part of the service was I think she was just a volunteer. I don't think she was even from the church, but she would come and kind of lead the worship.
Mm-hmm.
And she would go around and ask everybody, do you have someone that you would like to pray for today?
Mm-hmm.
And every time she came to Jim, and it was interesting, as we were doing the service, he stood apart. He stood out in a hallway by this big activity room, and the hallway had big openings into the room. But he would stand out there, and when she'd go to Jim and say, Jim, do you have anybody you would like to pray for today? And inevitably, Lori, he would say, yes, I want to pray for the children. I want to pray for, and that might be it. I want to pray for the children who have no place to go. On another Sunday, it might be, I want to pray for the children that nobody wants. It was just so heartfelt. And then when they get to the part of the service where they would be passing the peace, he'd come from the hallway into the room and he'd go around to every single resident and look them in the face and hold their hand and say, peace be with you.
Mm.
And he didn't hurry. He would just kind of lock eyes if they were looking at him. And then he'd move to the next person. And then one Sunday he did say to me, do you suppose I could do a service like that? Broke my heart because he was so good at doing informal things like that. And then he loved listening to stories about himself. So I wrote several Sunday things that happened. And one of them was, it was in the 60s. And our government had bombed the hospital in Vietnam, Children's Hospital. And I remember in the sermon him standing up and saying, "Shame on you, President Nixon." And several people got up and left the service.
Mm-hmm.
They did not think you should bring politics into the church. And Jim reminded them, saying, the stories of Jesus, I'm trying to follow the example of Jesus. When things were not going right, he didn't smooth it over.
No.
And so it was like, anyway, as the people that were left were leaving, one woman said, "Well, I won't be coming back." And Jim said, "I don't like the color purple of your hair. And if you try to get in, I won't let you in." Well, they both broke down laughing, and then they hugged each other. She did not like Jim's politics, but she loved Jim. And Jim loved her. And she did come back. So, but he was just full of, he loved people. He loved kids. He loved kids and his family. He was such a family man. Yeah, very special.
When you asked him about, if he wanted to pray, and he brought up the kids and, the abandonment, I wonder if that goes back to his childhood trauma too, of what he was feeling.
I didn't think about that. Yes, I wouldn't be at all surprised. It's just like that little 8-year-old boy trapped in his body, influenced, I think, a lot of what happened in his dementia.
Oh, yeah. Well, and they go back in time. In terms of what they
relive that. Yeah.
One thing I wanted you to share, if you're comfortable, is you have a chapter about the girlfriend. And I loved this story because
that was a hard chapter, Lori.
It happens so often, for people. But I really appreciated that you shared that. I went through similar situations with my mom. And granted, I wasn't married, to my mom, but just where the mind goes and what it connects with. So do you mind sharing that story?
Well, there are several stories, but one was he had a neurology appointment, and so I was going to pick him up and take him to the neurology appointment. And I always left a little bit early because it took longer than long sometimes to get him ready. And when I went up there to pick him up, he was sitting in this activity room, and he was sitting next to this woman, and he recognized that I was out there, and he came out into the hall and he said, "I have some really important news I want to tell you. I'm going to get married." And I said, "Jim, I don't know how that's going to work. You're already married." That was not the best response, but it was the response. And he said, "To who?" I said, "You're married to me." Mm-hmm. And he started crying. And he said, "She's going to be so disappointed. I've got to tell her. I've got to tell her." So one of the aides went into the room and got her out, and he told her that he couldn't marry her because he was already married. And she said, "You got to do what you got to do." So it was, and then it just kind of went on and on. There are places where he said, I really want to be with her." That was a hard chapter to remember and also to write about.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Was there a particular thing that you had remembered from that chapter, Laurie?
That was actually the one.
The one? Okay.
And what resonated with me was a couple of stories with my own mom. I was speaking at the nursing home one time and just doing some training. And at the end, a woman and her 3 kids were sitting in the back, and she got up and she said, I was asking for questions. She says, "I don't have a question. I just have a comment." And I said, "Oh, I'd love to hear it." She said, "I just want to thank you for your mother." And I said, "Oh, that's sweet." I said, "What makes you say that?" And she says, "Because your mom and my husband are in love." And she said, "Actually, it's made his transition so easy."
Ah.
And she said, "My kids and I come and have dinner. And when the 2 of them get separated, there's this angst. They're both looking for one another." And I just thought, she was so gracious at understanding it was about the comfort of the situation. Another time, my mom, she was sitting outside on this little glider, and she looked like a 16-year-old in love. I mean, she was just so excited, and she was gliding on this glider. And I sat down and I'm like, "Mom, what's up?" "Oh, nothing. I'm like, "Mom, something's up. What's going on?" She's like, "I met a guy." And I said, "Really?" I said, "What's his name?" She says, "Oh, I don't remember. I have Alzheimer's."
Oh.
And so I said, "Well, what does he look like?" And she's explaining, he's tall and got broad shoulders, and he's got this beautiful silver hair, and, they go for walks and they hold hands and blah, 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 blah. So for 2 weeks, I'm looking for this guy, in the nursing home, and I'm not finding anybody on her floor or anywhere around. And my mom used to sit by the front door. So I like, gosh, I hope she's not being abused by somebody or taking advantage of. So I talked to the nurse, and the nurse goes, "Lori, come on into the office." And I'm like, "Oh no, now what?" And she said, "Well, sit down." And I said, "Well, I just can't find this guy. Do you know who it is?" And she says, "It's Mary Ellis." My mom fell in love with a woman who had she physically appeared very manly. And I said, "Well, what do you want us?" She said, "What do you want us to do?" And I said, "Well, nothing. They're not, it's very innocent. She's very joyful. She deserves to be happy." Well, I come back, I don't know, probably a month and a half later, and I was visiting. I would visit her every day. It was probably a month and a half, 2 months later. I come back, and my mom's sitting on the glider again, madder than a wet hen, beet red, just arms crossed, and she's looking at everyone walking out the door. And Mary Ellis walks by, and if her eyes were fire, she would have been ashes. My mom was, and I said, she wouldn't tell me what happened because she was so embarrassed. But somebody told my mom that it wasn't an appropriate relationship, or that she was in love with a woman, and my mom, she was, in her 80s. She grew up Catholic. That was not a thing that was acceptable. For sure. Yeah. And so she was so embarrassed and so upset. And she held that anger for over 2 months. Poor Mary Ellis. She was just spitting fire at her every time she saw her. And again, it was just very innocent. They walked and they talked, and, it was just a good friend. And to this day, I don't know if it was my brothers. I think it was probably one of them, but it could have been a staff. And I just thought, and this is my opinion, not everyone will agree, but what right did you have to take away her happiness?
Exactly. Yeah.
This was bigger than a right or wrong thing.
This was
Simple.
part of the
Yeah.
heart. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And I don't think they really understood the damage that they did because they were uncomfortable with it.
Well, I remember writing this during this girlfriend time, my haiku. I am numb, just numb. Don't want to feel anything. Not callous, just numb. And that was a lot of what happened.
Yeah, it's really hard. I know, when they forget, who we are and what our name
Oh,
is, and people take that so personally, and I understand why, but our relationships go so much deeper, and to me, it's really about,
yeah.
do they feel safe and comfortable with us? Because that's really the biggest gift you can give anybody, no matter what age they are.
There were months and months and months that Jim did not know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he thought I was an okay person. He
Yep.
liked me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you just kind of got to be okay with where they are.
Yep.
Yeah. I was, you're talking about not knowing, one of my haiku, making sense of life. He doesn't know who I am. I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very important.
And then this trying to understand what was happening as he would go on and on. It was like my limitations can't fix, can tend and love him. Let it be enough.
Letting go of that control. We can't fix it, but we can support it. We can love.
Yeah.
And those are to me, those little sweet little moments. Like when he said, you make a big good. I mean, they just like, oh my God, they just melt your heart, and they like never go away. And, someone else would overlook that, but it's like, no, this is huge. This is massively huge,
Yeah.
And so, gosh, thank you so much for sharing. I have, a couple of other questions. One, from start to finish, when you decided, okay, you met with the two ladies, I'm going to write this book, to actually getting it published, how long did it take you?
Oh, geez. Well, it was probably a year and a half, maybe
Yeah.
maybe not that long. I don't really know date wise, but it seemed like a very long time.
Yeah.
But it was the two of them were just like, this wouldn't have happened without the two of them. They pulled it together and they made it happen, and they were very affirmative of me, and so they made it easy as writing about Alzheimer's can be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. People don't understand how long it takes, to write something, even like my Betty the Bald Chicken, which is, it's under 30 pages. It's a children's book. So most of it's pictures, but again, it's getting those right words. And I hooked up with Scott Carlson, who was he was a journalist, just to kind of egg me along, made me meet and go, okay, we're going to work on this, in back and forth. And then had a intern from the University of Minnesota, Emily, who was just exquisite in terms of her illustrations and stuff. But again, people don't understand the process. And then with my publisher too, she was just excellent to deal with. But there's so many choices out there. Was it just, when you decided on a publisher, was it these two women who did it, or is it a separate publishing company?
It was these two women. It's published by Balboa Press.
Okay.
And they asked me, did I have some place that I said, I don't know anything. I wouldn't even know what questions to ask. And I trust the two of you.
Mhm.
So if you can find a publisher that will accept it, yeah, whatever. So they are really the ones who decided.
Okay.
And it seemed like even once the decision was made, it was like the edits, and it was like, okay, Mary, you can't have any more edits. Your edits are finished.
Yep. Oh yeah, because
And then it just
wordsmith stuff forever. Yeah.
it seemed like it took forever, although it was probably only a few months. But I was so eager to get the book in my hands. It seemed like it took forever. Yeah.
Well, where do people find your book, Mary?
It's anywhere anywhere books are sold. So the regular book stores it's a print on demand. So it's not going to be in a bookstore in book form. So it's printed when it's ordered. It's Balboa Press. So it can be ordered through them. So actually anywhere books are sold, it's $16.99 for the book, or $3.99 if you get, I think it's either a Kindle or an ebook. Or
well, this was fantastic. If anybody wants to reach out to you, is there contact information that you'd like to give?
They can use Mary Todd at compassroselegacy.org.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Mary, so much for sharing your time and your story with us. And I still have lovely memories of the cruise.
Me too.
With the two of you, and it was just wonderful to be able to meet the two of you. And I still see Jim was just such a gentle soul, and yet always this big cheery smile on his face, and just such a gracious man. So thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. And again, people can pick up the book. You Make a Big Good, A Journey with Alzheimer's Disease by Mary Todd. So thanks again, Mary. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's lovely to see you again. And I really appreciate the opportunity to just tell a little bit about the book.
For our listeners, we always ask you to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share this podcast. It's not about the numbers. We could care less about the numbers. What we do care about is helping people, giving them something to reach out to, and be able to grab it when they're ready. And it doesn't cost any money to do that, and it takes very little time, but you have such a huge impact, and don't ever forget that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, take care, and we will talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Attention seniors. Are you looking for a community that offers incredible benefits and stands up for your values? Look no further than AMAC. With an AMAC membership, you'll enjoy exclusive discounts on insurance, travel, dining, and shopping. Stay informed with 6 issues a year of our award-winning AMAC magazine, delivering trusted news and valuable insights. But that's not all. AMAC is committed to defending America's future by directly bringing the voices of our more than 2 million members to our elected officials. Join a community that cares about your needs and your values. For a limited time, we're offering a 1-year membership for only $1. Yes, just $1 for a year of incredible benefits and advocacy. Don't wait. Take advantage of this special offer and join AMAC today. Visit amac.us/join now. That's amac.us/join now.